We now move on to a more general discussion with participants from the many activist networks that Bernard was participating in. This is organized by Judith Wambacq and Bart Buseyne. Judith is a visiting professor in the School of Arts at University College Ghent. She has written extensively on poststructuralism and phenomenology, art and French culture, and has translated together with Bart several texts by Bernard into Dutch. She's also the author of Thinking Between Deleuze and Merleau-Ponty. And Bart studied philosophy and anthropology in Leuven and Paris, and is affiliated to the National Library of Belgium. So,
thank you.
Aaron.
Thank you, Sjoerd. First, before starting, is this okay, Anne, Victor, and Maël, that this session is recorded? Because if you're not okay with this, we have to mention this to Don.
Sure, for me that's fine.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you all for being with us, for having accepted the invitation to talk about the three organizations of which you are, as you yourself prefer to say, contributors and not representatives or spokespersons. So thank you. We propose that we present the three organizations in chronological order. That is according to when they were created. So this means we will start with Maël Montévil, who is a mathematician and a biologist affiliated with the IRI in Paris. He will talk about the project Plaine Commune, or the Apprenant Contributif, the contributory learning territory, that was launched in 2016. After that, we will give the floor to Anne Alombert, who recently finished her PhD. Is that correct, Anne? Is it already behind you? Yeah, congratulations.
Yes. Congratulations.
And who teaches at Lille University. She will present us the collective Internation. And finally, we will talk with Victor Chaix, a journalist and activist equally affiliated with the IRI, who will introduce us to the Association of the Friends of the Generation of Greta Thunberg.
So, Maël, you come first. We have a threefold question for you. Could you tell us a bit, first of all, about the context in which the project Plaine Commune was initially conceived early in 2014? Second, what were or are the general outlines of the project? And finally, could you zoom in on one specific project, for example, the one in which you are or were personally involved, and explain how it concretizes the more general outlines? Thank you.
Sure. So thank you for the invitation. Maybe a further element to present myself is that I also have a philosophical side to my work. I'm also in University Paris 1 in the philosophy department. So actually I was not there when the project was initiated, or at least the first thought of the project were initiated. But in a nutshell, it stemmed from the Ars Industrialis group work, and Patrick Brauzek, who was the head of Plaine Commune, the president of Plaine Commune. Plaine Commune is a coalition of towns, basically, that are north of Paris. So Patrick Brauzek followed the work of Ars Industrialis, and at some point he wanted to do something based on the work of Ars Industrialis, and so the main, the central, or the overarching aim of of this project was to experiment contributive income. So what is contributive income? It's closely related to what Gerald Moore was talking about today. It's the idea that some people could have a part of their time as employees and part of their time working more freely, like in France, people who are working in art do. So it's a specific regime in a sense, with employment part and more free work part. And there was several rationales to push this idea forward. One of the first one is the idea that with increasing automation of work, the current economic system is unsustainable. That is to say, since work get more and more automatized, a lot of people who end up in unemployment and cannot consume. Thus, there is a contradiction in the current economic system. But this point is not the only one in the key rationale for contributive income and contributive economy. The second key point is to tame the toxicity of the rapidly changing technologies that are around us. And so it's closely related to Bernard's book, Dans la disruption. And we could also add that there are the indirect effects of technologies that we have to tame too, such as global warming. It's an indirect effect of the Industrial Revolution. And the last point, which is it's not the main one when talking to most stakeholders, but it's important, especially here. It's also to reconnect academia and other agents in society, including professionals of any kind of professions or just inhabitants. And so I don't think I need to develop it, but the main issue underlying all of this is the issue of knowledge and proletarianization on one side and deproletarianization on the other side. But it's not just deproletarianization, it's also giving birth to new knowledge, for example, pertaining to smartphones, which are new objects, new pharmaca. So for now, there are three main, let's say, developed experiments. There are several other ones that are underway, that are stuck or not stuck, but developing, but not yet completely fleshed out. The three ones that are going on are so the first one is around economy. And it's a bit a weird one. It's a kind of a meta work, but its concretization is in a work with Caisse des Dépôts. Caisse des Dépôts is a public investment bank, and so the economy group organizes a seminar at Caisse des Dépôts to work with investors. On the question of investment, it's a key question in Bernard's work. The second is in partnership with Éducation nationale, so public schools. And the central idea is to use a video game, Minecraft. It's a specific kind of game because it's a sandbox game. Where children can construct things. So to use this video game in a work at school to let's say for children to work on their urban environment. So it's a work that is in contribution with architects and urbanists, notably. So it's at the same time on pedagogy, reappropriation of the urban environment, and with digital tools, namely Minecraft. And the last one that I'm mostly working on is called the contributive clinic. Alombert, by the way, was also instrumental in making this work happen. And the idea of the contributive clinic is to work on smartphones and young children. The idea is that smartphones got recently introduced into families, into the milieu of families, and disrupt the interaction between parents and children, especially young children. And that leads to very detrimental consequences, language retardation, symptoms that look like autism, and so on. And the idea is that it's not sufficient to just say stop the smartphone, and instead we have to work on the conditions that leads to this situation, and work with inhabitants and professionals to find more to the point, let's say, solutions to this issue. And this work is maybe the most advanced in the sense that we have constituted a group, mostly of professionals of an institution which is called PMI in French, maternal and child protection structure. Initially with Anne, Bernard, Marie-Claude Bossière, who is a child psychiatrist, and so with professionals and parents. And this group now is getting in a very mature state, in a sense, so that, for example, if you ask the professionals there, they consider themselves as researchers. Working on this topic of the description of child development by smartphones. And the way this group was working initially is to have on one side, let's say, academic seminars, and on the other side, group work in Saint-Denis. And with feedback between the two. So, for example, when we had an academic seminar, we made a restitution of the work done in the seminar to the group. But now, and actually it's due to the first confinement in March, April, we have merged the two activities. And now we do the seminar directly in Saint-Denis. It's also because there is this maturity that of the group, so that we can do the academic seminars there. And there are several results, let's say, that show the success of this work. The first one is libido CND that developed in the group. That is to say, it's more difficult to provide everything that we are asked for than producing desire for what we can provide. I don't know if that was clear, but the second thing that make me think that it's a success is that the way the professionals work has changed as a result of this collective work. So, for example, one of the professionals there is using the concept of pharmacon when doing field work. That's one example among many. And the last one is that we are establishing new academic interactions, new academic contacts, so including recently with an epidemiologist. So to let's say integrate what we do in this group with the broader academic world. So I think I've spoken already a lot.
Thank you very much, Maël. Now, the aim of the project in Plaine Commune was not just to create a local economy, but to set an example that may be appropriated by other territories in a network of localized economies. This interregional or international dimension brings us to Anne d'Alombert.
Yeah, so maybe just to clarify the working method of this session. So we propose to first talk about the 3 different organizations and then questions that came up during the presentations and that may be linked to more than one presentation. They will come afterwards. Okay, so first we give the floor to every organization. Okay, Anne, we would like to ask you something about this notion of internation, because it refers to 3 things. Firstly, it's a notion that has been introduced by Marcel Mauss in 1920. Then it's also the name of the collective of which you are an active member. And then it's also the name of an institute that is going to be created. So could you expand a bit on this? Could you tell us why the collective was founded, how it adopts Mauss' notion, what can be expected at the institutional level, for example? There was this address to Guterres of the United Nations, so what has become of this, etc.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the organization also of this event and for your invitation. So I will try to answer to those 3 questions in 3 steps. So first, I will try to give a brief history of this idea of internation. Then I will try to present what is the Internation project, and then what could be the future of this project. So the idea of the internation. So we have to remember that this idea of an internation came up in the work of Bernard Stiegler in a book which is entitled States of Shock. That you may know, of course. So this book is composed of 2 parts. The first part is the theoretical debate with the post-structuralist thought with Simondon, Derrida, Lyotard, Deleuze. And the second part is a more practical and political part dedicated to the question of university, science and research and their role in what Bernard Stiegler calls the hyper-industrial societies of the 21st century. But the second part is still, the second part is still a discussion with Derrida in which Bernard Stiegler challenges the idea of a university without condition with the idea of a university under conditions. And it is in the context of this debate with Derrida that the notion of internation emerges. And in this text, the internation, and more precisely what Bernard Stiegler calls the academic internation, is defined as a process of co-individuation between many universities from all the world, which work together in order to constitute a public power at a global level and to transform the digital technologies into a public space of debate and controversy. And in this text, the notion of internation is also strongly linked with the notion of interscience, which was first used by Derrida in his project for what became the International College of Philosophy. And this notion of interscience, as Derrida mentioned it, is a reference to Albert Einstein, who spoke of what he called the International of Science in 1934, when he was participating to the Commission of Intellectual Cooperation of the League of Nations, which had been created 15 years before with the help of Henri Bergson, and at the precise moment in which Marcel Mauss wrote his book entitled The Nation, in which he mentioned this notion of internation in order to describe an internationalism which was not a negation of the specificities of the nations. So I will not speak about all these contexts now, but I just wanted to mention these points because I think that if we want to understand Bernard Stiegler project of Internation, it is important to look back to this context of the beginning of the 20th century, with Mauss, Einstein, and Bergson, who were both thinking and working in between the two world wars, at a moment in which the mortal character of civilizations, as Paul Valéry put it, and the ambiguity of techno-scientific progress had become obvious for everybody. And Bernard Stiegler will revive these notions of interscience and internation in the beginning of the 21st century, after having described the pharmacological dimension of techno-scientific progress, and at a time when the question of the mortality of civilizations had become the object of many discourses and of many debates about Anthropocene, Capitalocene, and collapsology. So it was in this context that the Internation collective was initiated in 2018, so 6 years after the writing of States of Shock, and during a symposium which was organized by Bernard Stiegler and Hans-Ulrich Obrist in London. The collective Internation was composed of a group of many people from different horizons. Most of them were academic searchers in many different fields or disciplines, and there were also lots of citizens or professionals who worked in different domains. And the aim of this group was to work together during 2 years in small workshops and in a punctual symposium in order to produce a collective scientific analysis of the current global situation, which is called the Anthropocene, and to make some propositions in order to initiate a bifurcation to go beyond this situation. So I just have to say a few words about what was this analysis and what were these propositions. The point of departure of the reflections of the International Collective was the idea developed by Bernard Stiegler, according to which the Anthropocene with an A can be described as an Anthropocene with an E. That is to say that the Anthropocene can be understood as the process of augmentation of entropy rates in different fields, in the thermodynamic field through the exploitation of natural resources, in the biological field through the elimination of biodiversity, and in the psychosocial field through the destruction of knowledge and the standardization of ways of living. So the consequence of such an idea for Bernard Stiegler was that if we want to go beyond this anthropocenic situation, we must elaborate and experiment a new economic model whose aim is to fight against the production of entropy through the valorization of what he called neganthropic activities, which are activities of work during which people practice all types of knowledge, theoretical knowledge, technical knowledge, practical or existential knowledge. And the practice of all this knowledge is always local, so it takes place at different local levels. So this is why the question of locality was a very important question in those reflections too. So this was the general argument around which each group had to work and had to project, in fact, these very general reflections in different fields. So the field of epistemology, the field of education, of economy, of design, of ethics, of international politics, of urbanity, etc. So the results of this collective work was first published online, and it was publicly presented in Geneva in January 2020. So for the century of the League of Nations. So the aim of this event in Geneva was to launch a discussion at the United Nations on the topics which were addressed in the collective document that had been written, in order to convince the United Nations to launch an international program of contributory research on the questions which were developed in the document, so as to investigate these questions at a theoretical level to articulate these theoretical investigations with concrete social experimentations according to the method of the contributory research. So the event took place in Geneva. Lots of people attended it and were interested by the perspectives which were presented, but the UN did not answer to the call, and even if there were lots of relations developed with people working in the UN, no international program was launched for the moment. But at least the result of all this work, which were first published online, turned into a book which was published in France in June 2020, and which is entitled Bifurqué. And we will certainly be translated soon in other languages. So what we can hope now is that thanks to this book, the ideas which were presented in Geneva will spread into the society at different levels and will be concretized at different scales through different institutions and through different projects. Indeed, this book, which is hypomnesic support, will have been useful only if it gives birth to new collective anamnesic process. So this means to new work and new projects. As Bernard Stiegler puts it in States of Shock, a work becomes a real work if it can work beyond itself, if it can lead to what does not look like itself, to what is other than itself, but which would have remained impossible without it. So this is why we decided with Michal Krikowski, who was one of the main contributors of this book, to organize an online open seminar around the book Bifurqué through a cooperation between our two universities, so the Catholic University of Lille in the north of France, where I work, and the University of Silesia in Katowice, in the center of Poland, where Michal Krikowski is working. So, of course, through this reticulation between our two academic institutions and our two localities from Western Europe on one side and from Eastern Europe on the other side, we hope to revive this dream of an academic internation defined as a co-individuation of the universities from different parts of the world, but in a more realistic way. We just hope to give a new life to the book, to reactivate the ideas which were sedimented in it, and to debate them and to discuss them with the authors of the book, of course, but also with lots of other people who could be interested, academics from different disciplines, professionals from different horizons, citizens, associations, think tanks, political parties, economic actors, etc. So thanks to, and also we would like, and there we have the chance that lots of students and young generations are interested too by this book. So it's a great opportunity to share the ideas with the younger generation. So we hope that thanks to this debate and this discussion and this work, we hope that this book will not just be the achievement or the fulfillment or the result of the Internation collective, but the beginning of new things which cannot yet be expected.
Thank you. You offered us a nice bridge to Victor. You talked about the younger generations. Of course, this bifurcating work cannot be done without the younger generations. So, Victor, could you maybe follow up on this? Bart has some questions for you.
Well, we have a threefold question for you too. First of all, could you tell us who exactly are the generation of Greta Thunberg? Secondly, who the friends of this generation are? And thirdly, how you would qualify the work that the friends and the generation are engaged in together? Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for this seminar. So these are very interesting questions, which I will try to reply by presenting the history of the association and the ideas that compose it. So as Anne concluded, the Association of the Friends of the Thunberg Generation attempts to socialize the ideas that are sedimented in Bifurquet to youth movements for the climate and against the environmental crisis, let's say, or more broadly, fighting against the Anthropocene. So if I can share a PowerPoint, maybe. I don't know if it works. Well, maybe it's not necessary to show my slides. I will do without. So in the wake of the Internation project, this association was born in late 2019. So it's a pretty young association still. It was launched during the Entretien du Nouveau Monde Industriel 2019, after that a couple of encounters between Bernard Stiegler, young activists from Youth for Climate and Extinction Rebellion, and ERE staff and Internation network researchers. So it aimed to articulate the work of these researchers with the engagement of the youth movements. One part to provide the conceptual weapons to the youth, and on the other to inscribe the knowledge of the elders, the friends, at the service of an alternative we are fighting for. So in the history, after Bernard a video of Bernard diffused on YouTube in a Thinkerview supporting Greta Thunberg and her generational cause, Virgile Mouquet, he contacted Bernard to see how we can work together between the Internation collective, what they have to propose, and youth movements in face of the ecological catastrophe. And so Bernard invited him and other members of Youth for Climate at the ENI Préparatoire. And yet after the speech that Greta Thunberg made in September at the UN, Bernard was really impressed by really shocked by the reactions that the speech provoked in France and beyond, notably, for example, by the president of the Association of the Friends of the Palais de Tokyo, who actually publicly called on Facebook to abat Greta Thunberg, which is take her down. So he wanted, with Jean-Marie Leclésio, to create an association that defended her and her generational cause, which he did during the ENI. And 2 days later, the Association of the Friends of Greta Thunberg changed to the name of Association of the Friends of the Thunberg Generation, actually, to include a much more generational perspective and to defend more than Greta Thunberg the generational fight that she represents. So a dialogue with activists took place on the 10th of January, when the Internation collective presented its main arguments to the UN. In the same day, in the morning, we held a dialogue between a couple of activists of the group and some researchers of the collective on these arguments. And 2 months later, well, at the end of February, Bernard decided to change Ars Industrialis into Association of the Friends of the Thunberg Generation / Ars Industrialis. So to combine the two and to redefine the aims of Ars Industrialis, which are a new industrial politics of the technologies of spirit in the context of the Anthropocene and the generational fight and also to include a dimension of intergenerational transmission, to transmit all the knowledge that has been created since then, since the creation of Ars Industrialis, to youth movements. So yes, it's quite a complex association in that sense that it revolves around a couple of networks, which are Internation Network, Ars Industrialis Network, ERE staff, what we call the Thunberg generation, and yes, basically. Yes, that's basically for the early history. Then the confinement came, the lockdown, and so the school of the Thunberg generation that we wanted to constitute was put to hardship, but we still decided to hold seminars, online seminars, around themes that were a point of confluence between Internation researchers, their thesis, and the group of the Thunberg generation interest in engagements. So these themes were, for instance, sobriety and industrial economy, which was kind of a compromise between our engagements and Bernard's idea on economical, libidinal economy. And so yes. So it's aimed to be an itinerant school that travel between territorial experimentations and territoire laboratoire that were to be constituted. And yes, it is still a project in constitution. What also it is trying to do is to constitute an online community, online learning community that reconsiders the use of digital tools to share knowledge and knowledge that can be put at the service of the fight against the Anthropocene. So my slides wanted to present this server that I created with the inspiration of both activists' chat servers and ERE's categories and meta-categories work on the categories and meta-categories. So it's an intergenerational network a server where we try to share knowledge online and deproletarianize in our common fight. So yes, yes, I can stop here maybe.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for the three of you. So it's very clear that you are all very familiar with Stieglerian terminology, his way of analyzing what is going on today. But I'm wondering to what extent the people you are working with, do they also know this terminology? Like, for example, Maël, you were talking about the people you are working with who consider themselves researchers and no longer workers. Like, does this mean that they have gotten that they've received a kind of introduction to Stieglerian analysis, or is this not required, or is this not the framework in which these concrete initiatives are taking place?
Or do they participate in the creation of critical notions through the research they perform?
So that's a very good question. In the Contributif clinic, let's say what we have done in the seminar was not centered on Bernard's thought. For example, we read Winnicott, Freud, Toscaïès, so a lot of psychology. I've made a seminar too on developmental biology and so on. But at the same time, when Bernard was here, of course, he was reading, let's say, Freud or Winnicott from the perspective of his philosophy. So through this mean, they got acquainted with Bernard's way of thinking. Now we probably also will do seminars based on Bernard's text. And so they are familiar with some of Bernard's concepts. What was the second question? Yes, do they participate in shaping new concepts and so on? And I will say, but here it's more related to my work. Part of my work is to conceptualize and theorize descriptions in biology from the biological perspective, because description is a word that is commonly used in the biological literature. In ecology, there are also endocrine disruptors and so on. So one of my projects is to theorize that in biology, including by doing mathematics, looking at data and so on. And the idea is that this work is also to understand how screens can disrupt child development. Overuse of digital media can disrupt child development. And from my perspective, the work in the clinic contributes to shape the concepts that I'm developing and the framework that I'm developing. So I would say yes.
Is it right then that to synthesize as follows, that it's not only the aim to really develop concrete actions that might that have a therapeutic value, but that it's also important to learn these actors on the field how they can think about what is going on?
Yes, yes, exactly. It's the idea is to let's say to address concerns of a public. Here it's mostly mother or parents and the professionals, the public that is involved in the contributive clinic, and to address it by bringing in academic knowledge and to work together by articulating, integrating, so both the experience of the parents and the experience of the professional and academic knowledge to in order to birth something new knowledge, basically. But so the idea is really that academic knowledge plays a key role in the discussion in the group. So, for example, we discussed dopamine, and Gerald Moore also came to give a seminar in this group on his work, basically. But
to make a link then to Victor and the Association of the Friends of the Thunberg generation, how do you actually try to make the young generation interested in this terminology, in this way of thinking? Because I can imagine that it's not easy to explain to teenagers what this is, what all these notions mean.
Yes, well, it's there's not a lot of teenagers. We have the group of the Thunberg generation that participates most. We are between 18 and 25. But so we don't try to convince people of this concept. Most of these members came by themselves, actually, interested by the work of Bernard, Internation, and the Plaine Commune project. What I tried to do through a blog on Mediapart is to make these ideas, theories, and concepts more accessible, maybe to an engaged public that constitute Mediapart readers, because of course not everybody is going to read the whole bifurcated book. Well, yes, actually, what the series of seminars and internal discussions, because it was really it's really a school that is turned in the interior, if we can say it like this. It was a transmission of knowledge, and Bernard really tried to explicit his concepts, his ideas, along with other researchers from Internation and ERE. to the group of the Sandberg generation.
Okay, thank you. Bart,
No,
okay.
yeah, we have a question concerning the word savoir, which we hesitate to translate as knowledge. In the therapeutics of contributory economy, the notion of savoir plays a very central role, while the economy as we know it valorizes information that is anthropic. Contributory economic intends to valorize savoir that is neganthropic. You could say that the distinction between travail and emploi, I mean work and employment, is also based on this distinction between information and savoir. But what is it exactly, savoir?
Maybe this is a question for Anne, because it's quite central in the Bifurquet book. I don't know. You want to divide the speaker's time?
If you want, Anne, go ahead, and maybe I'll talk later or not.
Yes, I can try to say a few things.
I'm sorry, but Victor, do you know that you are sharing your screen with us?
So it works. I was wondering.
Maybe this should be recorded.
Okay.
So,
sorry.
This notion of yes, the problem with this translation. I mean, I'm not an English speaker, so I cannot really speak about that. But I have the impression that yes, knowledge, in fact, is the word which is used to translate connaissance, and this is a problem because, of course, when Bernard uses savoir, it is precisely not to say connaissance, or I mean, it is not the same thing. So, because what he's doing when he's speaking about savoir is speaking about different types of savoir. So, what we call in French savoir-faire, savoir-vivre, and he says that connaissance, so knowledge, is just one of these types of savoir. So I don't know if it's very clear, but this is I think it is in the translation of Bernard Stiegler's work. I think it is the distinction between theoretical knowledge, know-hows, and know-how to live. So okay, so yes, the translation, I think, is a problem, and so I guess the question was how can we define savoir in a way? I mean, and how can we distinguish savoir from information or from competence? For example, what we were also saying, we were saying that savoir was not a competence, that there were they had to be distinguished, and also how to distinguish work from employment. And I think that one of the important dimension on this was to say that, so I will use the word knowledge, but I mean savoir, so if it's okay. Or maybe I can just use the word savoir. So there is, in fact, a savoir when there is not only an automatization of a certain competencies or of certain abilities or capacities, but when the people are also in a process of invention or singularization or transformation. What I want to say is that they are transforming themselves by practicing this savoir or this knowledge, and at the same time they are transforming this knowledge or this savoir. So there is a sort of co-individuation between the one who is practicing the knowledge, the savoir, and the savoir which is being transformed in a singular way. And I think this was a very important dimension in the distinction between work and employment, because Bernard Stiegler saw that in most of the case, employment is based on the standardization of the process, on the division of the task, and then how to explain? Yes, and so so when the tasks are divided like that, there is a kind of automatization which is happening, and the people become interchangeable. They can all be replaced by one by another, and there is no more singularity in their activities. And I think that this notion of individuation and singularities are very important in his conception of work. So maybe that's a way to put the things. Maybe it is. I don't know if it is very clear, but yes.
Yes, it was very, very clear.
Does anyone of you know what Bernard Stiegler may mean by journeys of knowledge? In the Nanjing lectures, he says that he writes that he tries to teach his students not to use Google via just an informational approach, but instead to practice journeys of knowledge via individuating approaches. So I don't know what he may have meant. I looked up what I took to be a possible French equivalent, journée de connaissance ou journée de savoir, but it wasn't very helpful.
Voyage, non?
Ouais.
Plutôt un voyage.
So journeys of knowledge, if that may be Freudian.
Maybe I don't know the precise text, but maybe I could have an idea. But I will have to check after this meeting. But what I think is that this an information is something that you receive it. But you know, I receive it in the same way that you receive it. Everybody is receiving it in the same way. It is the same, the information, and the knowledge is when you are individuating the information. So maybe what he wanted to say is that you should not use the web just to check for facts or having this or this information, but to try to do an anamnesic process or an anamnesic journey, I don't know, in order to enter an individuation process with by for example, trying to, I don't know, go beyond the mere information to more profound process of knowledge. But I don't know, I'm just trying to interpret this. But
Thank you.
But I would like to ask a question about the relation between Stiegler's philosophy and then his activism, because it's I don't know another philosopher who has been so active on the field. I mean, Stiegler, he has co-founded different organizations. He has collaborated with artists. He helped developing software. He was negotiating with companies like Orange. He was heard in parliamentary hearings, etc., etc. So he was very active. But I'm wondering how all this doing of philosophy, how this is, if there is a relation with his philosophy itself, and how does it position him as a philosopher? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like,
yes, but maybe Victor or Maël, do you want to have a reaction on that? Because I just spoke before, so, and maybe I could tell a word after.
Maybe Victor first, because he didn't, but I can speak too.
Allez, Maël.
Well, actually, I'm not entirely comfortable with the word activism, because in a sense, you know, there is a new trend in analytic philosophy about experimental philosophy. So Bernard's work has nothing to do with that, but his experiments were also part of his philosophical work. So I will not disconnect the two. They are very, very much interrelated. and they were also interrelated because his let's say field work was a consequence of his philosophy on one side, and at the same time was nourishing his philosophy. So and maybe another comment, which is more at the practical level, or the it's that Bernard was still very much a philosopher, let's say, in the clinique contributive, or when he was talking to the head of big banks and situation like that. So he was still doing philosophy in this kind of interactions and activities.
Yes, if I can add something, I think that it depends how you define philosophy, but in a way, all what he was doing was philosophical, we could say. But what I wanted to say was also that there is, I think, a very strong link between these two parts. If we agree to say that there are two parts, I would say the writing of the books on one side and the more social or technological engagements on the other side. And I think that I mean the big idea of Bernard Stiegler philosophy is certainly the discovery of the fact that Western traditional philosophy has forgotten in a way the question of techniques, or that the question of techniques has not been thought in Western philosophy. So when you have such a strong philosophical gesture, I guess that then there are two things that are really important. I mean, the first thing is to reinterpret this history of philosophy, and in order to reveal this forgetting of techniques, and especially for techniques as a tertiary retention. And in the other side, it is also in the same move. I mean, it is also very important, I guess, to get implied in technological projects and in industrial projects, because otherwise you will in a way reproduce this repression of techniques that you have been revealing in the history of philosophy. So I guess that it was very one and the same gesture that led him to these implications. And I mean, for me, I don't know, but for me, it is not a coincidence that the philosophical discovery of the role of tertiary retention in noetic life correspond in a way to a practical care of the tertiary retention in order to make this noetic life possible. I mean, I cannot distinguish really these two dimensions. And I think that, yes, it was quite obvious for all the people who worked with Bernard that there was really this transductive relation between what he was writing and what he was doing, and that it was impossible for him to separate the two things. And yes, and yes, the fact of working with him makes you think that it is in fact strange to separate them. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe a last question before we open the discussion to the public. Maybe there are other people who would like to know things from our three speakers. But a last question to Victor, maybe. When you were presenting the work of l'Association des Amis de la Génération de Greta Thunberg, you summarized it as followed. You said, we want to socialize the ideas of bifurqué. And so socialize, and I was thinking about social media, and in bifurqué, I think I read that you're also working on a new kind of social media that is not based on the individual but on the group. And so I was wondering if you are using these new kind of social media in the spreading of these ideas.
Yes, totally. We try to use these social media alternatively. And if you say that my screen can be shared, I will try to do it now. Do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So what we're trying to do is here to use a server that is called Mattermost to deliberate concepts, for example, concepts of elaborated by art industrialists and developed by Internation between Virgil and Maël here. Here we try to make a detour of the tools so that we meta-categorize as trouble and categorize the content, and everything is categorized. We did this also because at first we were on WhatsApp, because WhatsApp was really hell to continue with, to share documents. So yes, and as to socialize concepts and content, here you can see Marie trying to socialize the concept of entropy in social mobilization, something which Bernard was quite proud actually. At the end, he was it was for him an image of his ideas spreading into youth movement about entropy. So that he showed as well to the clinic contributive members and health. Well, yes, basically, I hope that's satisfying.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not understand that this server you were talking about, this is actually this new kind of social media. Okay, are there people from the public who have questions? For Anne, Victor, yes, Colette?
Hello, thank you very much. I just wanted to add a little thing about the link between philosophy and activism by Bernard Stiegler. We had a good example with the testimonies of Gert Levink and Harry Alpin. And I think that the philosophy for Bernard was not only to have the possibility to think, but to have the possibility to understand the complexity of what happens in the life and in everyday life and in history. And he had presented technique and times in this goal, also to rethink the modern technique into our contemporary life. So it's not a complete answer, but it's I wanted to add this. And as I am also a member of Internation, of Ars Industrialis and of Association des Amis de la Génération Thunberg, I wanted to say that the capacity to have these groups and these collective thinking and action is linked to that capacity for Bernard Stiegler to link many people, and to link many disciplines, many knowledge, many experiences in different groups, and the trans-individuation made by this group around the concept, the question about the situation of the world, about the economy, different nationalities too, and the importance of the no diversities of these approaches is very important too. And now the the approaches, the approach of the generations, and I say generations and not only generation, because he had a word that is a genealogy, and you can create a new epoch and a new generation alive with this genealogy. And I think we have to continue to collaborate in this way. What do you think, Victor? You are the youngest.
You have to unmute your microphone.
Yes, totally. So I believe he also changed the Ars Industrialis to the Association of the Friends of the Thunberg generation because of this, because of what you just said, Colette, who also follows the principle that what Maël told me was the principle of Plaine, is that when you transmit ideas to a new generation, they are more likely to be integrated than trying to convince adversaries about this. And also, yes, because he had a lot of hope in the Thunberg generation. I think he really saw Greta Thunberg as the anti-anthropic singularity that was absolutely improbable, but that still that emerged in the public scene and drove a generation behind her, and that was the reason for him to continue working and transmitting his knowledge. That's my interpretation.
Thank you. Norris, you have a question? Hello.
Herm, do you have a question? Unmute.
Yeah, hi, sorry. It's really nice to see so many of you again. It's been a very long time and I've really enjoyed today a lot. My question is for Anne. It's about attentional forms or formes d'attention, formes attentionnelles, and their relation with savoir. Do you think that formes attentionnelles are quite similar to savoir insofar as they help select which automations to integrate into one's exchanges with the environment to improve life? The reason I'm asking this is because for many months I've been really struggling with writing about knowledge without really understanding it the way that you do. So I've kind of shifted in my interest away from trying to define knowledge and more towards understanding the function of knowledge, and doing it through talking about Whitehead and his analysis of the function of reason, how it allows us to select certain methodologies that allow us to exchange with the environment to improve our lives. These methodologies are maybe a bit similar to connaissance, like to have the skills, and this is really the automation side of knowledge. But we need a different kind of knowledge to select between these methodologies to create a kind of paradigm within which we live. And so this sort of higher tier knowledge, maybe this is theoretical knowledge, I'm not sure, but it's what he calls reason. And I think Bernard talks about reason, but as a specific kind of attention, an attention to things that come into one's life, and these can be new kinds of technologies, new ways of exchanging, but these new apparitions are distracting as well. They are like what Whitehead refers to as appetition, or what maybe Gerald refers to as stimulation. And without proper regulation, these can lead to types of addiction. So I'm just wondering if maybe this is a good way of understanding savoir, that it allows us to sort of look at new kinds of stimulation and how to incorporate them within our environments.
I don't know if I have really something to answer because it was very complex already, but maybe I can say just a few words about this question of attention, and then about this question of reason, which you mentioned. I had the feeling that you mentioned these two concepts and you tried to articulate them with the question of knowledge. So maybe I can say just a few words on that, because I think they were very important for Bernard Stiegler. Indeed, I don't have the text of Whitehead in mind, so I will not comment on that. But I had the feeling that Bernard Stiegler was trying, I think, to articulate the Kantian concept of reason with this notion of reason in Whitehead. And what he was saying, and I had the feeling that the researches or the conceptions developed by Whitehead on this notion of the function of reason were helping him in a way in order to rethink the distinction between understanding and reason in Kant. And he was insisting a lot, if I remember well, on this distinction, saying that reason was the capacity to create bifurcation. And so this is linked with what I was saying just before, because you have this kind of not oppositions, but distinctions between concepts. Like understanding would be a kind of a faculty which is automatizable in a way, while a reason, because it is an analytical faculty, while reason is a synthetical faculty in which you are always singularizing something. You are not just decomposing something, you are synthesizing, and in the same way making a new step. It is the same when you, for example, when you are making a synthesis of a text, it is your own synthesis. It is not the same that someone else. So there is something new, and here there is a process of knowledge, which is not only a process of, which is not only a competence or not only an analysis, and this is not automatizable. And yes, so I could say things on attention, but maybe I don't want to take too much time, so maybe we can discuss it later. But yes, what you said about the stimulation and distraction, I think is very linked with the question of attention deficit disorder, which was one also of the big concerns of Bernard Stiegler, and for him, the school and the education system had a very important role to play in the formation of attention and in the opening of new attentional forms. Okay. I stop there because.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I don't see any hands raised. No? Okay, then maybe I have a question, since you all knew Bernard personally and quite well. I think I would like to know where did he find the time to do all these things? Like so many books and then all these associations. Like how do you explain it? How is one man capable of doing all this stuff?
I think that one of the big problem is that the speed of Bernard's thought was very, very higher than our own speed of thought. So we will have to get to work a lot in order to understand all what he did in a very short time.
On a very practical level, he was quite organized, doing more, let's say, creative work and writing in the morning, then synchronizing himself with society by listening to the radio around noon and doing more social stuff in the afternoon. So, and earlier, I think he was also playing with his dopamine when writing while doing bicycle. Of course, not writing physically, but talking to a voice recorder. Mm. That's some practical aspects of it.
And how will all these three organizations, how will they be able to go on? What's their future without Bernard Stiegler? Like, were you prepared for this? Like, was he already organizing the delegations, or delegating the work, or does he leave behind a very big hole, which of course he leaves a hole in our sentiments, in our emotions, but in the organization, the structure of the organization, is that also something you're scared about? Or
well, he was a center of gravity for many groups, many initiatives, and many collectives. That is hard to fulfill, indeed. Actually, it's impossible to fill this hole. So it's as if a sun disappeared and all the satellites are dispersed, and we're trying now to get back together. But you know, it's I think it's quite. I interpret it in what he said in like Passé à l'acte. What he wrote on Passé à l'acte about transindividuation and the relation between the I and the us. So now there's the us, but there's not the I of the philosopher of Bernard, and so it's not always easy, but we tried.
I think that, I don't know, but I think that for Bernard, what was, I mean, I don't know, but when I read his text, I have the feeling that what was really important for him was that his ideas and what he wrote would be interpreted and worked with by many other people, and not just the group that he created. I think that what is important is that now these groups can maybe work as for the transmission of what they did, and to how do you say that? To give testimonies of what have been done and what have been worked. But what is important now is that all which is in the Noéthique Nécromas can be revived through other persons and through other groups and through other institutions, and through because it was an urgency for him, I think. So yes, an emergency. Sorry,
Vincent, do you want to add something to that? I see your hand raised.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Sorry, we had to leave for precisely one of the seminars that Bernard launched, actually on economy of contribution. So you see that, of course, for IRI, it's very important that a collective must continue to work together, like you do tonight. And that's why we try with Gerald. Also, maybe he can say some words. We try to organize, at least for IRI, a connection between theory and our practical experimentation, because IRI is concentrated on practical experimentation, territorial experimentation, and also digital experimentation. But we need absolutely to continue to have this strong link with philosophy, with theory, and that's why we work with Gerald and Olivier also on organizing this connection, which is very important for the future of, at least for IRI, it is quite important, and it's quite difficult, of course, after the the death of Bernard. Gerald, maybe you can comment. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, hang on.
You're still muted. You're still muted.
Okay, apologies. I re-muted myself. I wanted to follow up by saying I think we need to be very careful not to be overly fetishistic about erecting Bernard here as some paragon of work. He destroyed himself with his work ethic, and we know that. He was driven by an absolute mania that was definitely characterized by genius, and that meant he could produce phenomenal quantities of work, but he used writing as a form of self-therapy that wasn't only about communication for him. So I certainly don't think he's necessarily, for all the genius that he's emitted, he's not a model that we should be looking to follow necessarily. He was wholly a singularity in that respect. As Vincent was saying, there are ways that we can push forward with his project that don't involve attempting to destroy ourselves through some impossible work ethic. But we have to play to our strengths here, and the strengths that Bernard didn't necessarily have himself. You know, he was fantastically charismatic, but he relied on charisma to carry the communicational value of his arguments when addressing the general public. We can take more accessible pedagogical approaches because we won't be reliant on the same lexicon that he was. We can use it when it's necessary, but we can find different pedagogical ways of posing the same problems, and you know, we can't be reliant on the same kind of force of argumentation that he was. I think that Vincent here was absolutely right, that at the heart of his project was the experimental practical side of work. The theoretical groundwork that he's laid out has got more than enough mileage in it to keep us going for the very foreseeable future. The task that remains to be done now is going to be inevitably one of publicization more, translating it into idioms and vernaculars that didn't come naturally to Bernard himself. So there's a great deal of work to be done. For example, I've been doing it myself on translating everything that he's done into the idiom of contemporary science, forging connections with scientists in the way that we've already started to do with the Internation, with partners like Anna Soto and Carlos Sonnenschein, as well as Maël Montévil, obviously, Giuseppe Longo too. But the heart of Bernard's project, as Vincent was saying, it was the experimental side. And we can keep going on that front, and indeed we may well be facilitated on that front by having a more pedagogical approach. I think we can do that, but certainly I think a direction that I want to see us push both the Institut de Recherche et d'Innovation and the Amis de la Génération Thunberg. You know, the Pharmacon.fr summer school ran for 3 years and was headed by one person. Well, we need to maximize that so that we're running it for a lot longer and with multiple different people running multiple courses every year. Multiple different projects, getting people involved, but most importantly, getting people to pick up on what they want to do themselves. So I don't think we're shorn of a future by any means. The real issue is going to be, I always think of the title of Badiou's little book on Samuel Beckett, this Désir incrévable. That was Bernard's. He had the most phenomenal energy that was totally self-destructive, but nonetheless, it was absolutely phenomenal. We can't expect ourselves to have that. That becomes the big question for me, is where we refine the drive and the momentum. And I think Bernard knew himself. We discussed what his legacy would be. We tried to get him to set up plans for his archive before, because we knew that this was going to happen, but he wasn't responsive. I do think, though, that with Bifurquet, he recognized that he had to be translated into multiple people doing his work. And what he saw in the Internation was the possibility of securing his own legacy, not by being Bernard, but by getting multiple people to do the work that he had been doing himself.
I think that is a wonderful way of closing this session. It has been a long day. I thank all the three of our speakers and everybody present here. I hope to see you tomorrow, and bon appétit, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.